Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ming from Stony Brook University. I'm excited to be here to talk about our work of measuring the security mechanism support in mobile browsers. This is a joint work with my colleague, Pierre Projects, and my advisors, Nima Aldement and Nick Nikiforakis. Actually, Nick is in the other session. Nowadays, people are relying more and more on mobile devices for their daily computing needs, such as shopping, banking, and social networking. As of last year, more than 52% of all worldwide online traffic is coming from mobile devices. This number is even larger within the US. So, the mobile traffic has overtaken that of traditional desktop computers. The same percentage of web apps is also delivering to the mobile devices. In the desktop world, web apps have historically been vulnerable to a wide range of the client-side attacks, such as the cross-site scripting, CSRF, and clickjacking. To protect users of vulnerable web apps, different security mechanisms have gradually been introduced to prevent against these attacks over the past years. So these mechanisms can help with isolating different origins, defending against man-in-the-middle attacks, protecting cookies, and enhancing privacy. Most of them at webmaster's disposal can be activated through the HTML tags and HTTP response headers to ask for particular safeguards. Well, the same origin policy as the primary security mechanism in modern browsers is enabled by default. Since the client-side attacks it's not limited to the desktop world, so it's also necessary to employ the security mechanisms to the mobile world. As opposed to the desktop world, hundreds of mobile browsers that attract significant amounts of users are available in the market. Each of them can advertise unique features such as the built-in anti-tracking capabilities, voice control, and the increased performance. Given so many browsers people can utilize, the security level of each browser might be different a lot. So two users may get substantially different security guarantees depending on the browser they utilize. However, no peer work focuses on capturing the security mechanism support in mobile browsers. So in this work, we select the top 20 mobile browsers that get most downloads from the Google Play Store, and then we conduct studies from different dimensions to understand their implementations of the security mechanism support. These browsers may range from billions of downloads like Google Chrome to millions like the AdBlock browser. In order to capture the evolution of the security mechanism support in these browsers, we try to collect as many versions as possible, by which we implement website-specific crawlers to fetch the previous versions of browsers from some APK archiving websites. The measuring of security mechanism support is made using an automated browser-agnostic testing framework called Hindsight. This is from our previous work published in CCS 2017. So the framework can resolve the challenges we will encounter while launching large-scale mobile browser testing. For this work, we incorporate the testing pages and dedicated evaluation logics for the different security mechanisms. The evaluation logic can determine whether a browser is properly implemented a security mechanism, and then the result will be saved into our database. Here is a brief summary of our test suite. The list is compiled by reviewing previous works as well as some standards and recommendations on securing modern web apps. We make an effort to be as comprehensive as possible. Therefore, we only exclude mechanisms that are currently being deprecated or some very recent and experimental mechanisms. So in total, we designed around 400 tests for different types of security mechanisms, and then we create a templating system to generate testing pages in a semi-automatic way. By running this many tests on top of the hundreds of mobile browsers, at least 138,000 vulnerability reports are generated. So when a test is gauged as success, we mark that browser as successfully supporting the mechanism. Otherwise, it's lack of support. So we then analyze the vulnerability reports according to 3 perspectives. First, we take a longitudinal study to capture the evolution of security mechanism support over time. Second, as many mobile browsers are building using the web view, the components that enabling mobile apps to load web content. So we analyze how the security mechanism support is related to the web view and underlying system. Finally, we take a few case studies over the common vulnerabilities as found in the paper. Let's start from the longitudinal study. At very early stage of this work, there are a couple of research questions around our minds. The first question is, do mobile browsers support more and more security mechanisms over time? So to answer this, we group browser versions of a family with each passing year, and we calculate the average number of vulnerable tasks for every browser family. So this figure basically shows the general vulnerability trend of 3 most popular versus 3 least popular mobile browsers. So we find in general, mobile browsers are supporting security mechanisms better and better. 2 exceptions are the Jubon browser and Bolt browser. They both have millions of downloads, but they're still vulnerable to more than 60 tasks, and they're not updated since 2016. Although UC browser get more downloads than the Firefox browser, but we find there the UC browser is showing a lot more vulnerabilities than the Firefox. So that means more popular browsers are not necessarily more secure. The second question is there any difference in the support rate of security mechanisms? We find some security mechanisms, such as the same origin policy, which is used to restricting the interactions between different domains. This mechanism is actually always being well supported, but others, like the content security policy, is still not well supported. So we think it's not only difficult for the webmasters to write correct policies, but also difficult for the browser vendors to account for all directives constantly as recommended. Another interesting finding is that the HSTS, the strict transport security header, starts with little support, but is eventually as widely supported as the same origin policy. So we believe this change is because of the general push from browser vendors towards the HTTPS by default web, and the gravity of SSL stripping-like attacks that HSTS can defend against. So far, it's obvious that the rate of security mechanism support on different browsers and different security mechanisms could vary a lot. So webmasters may ask for some security mechanisms, but can't ensure their users can get the expected security guarantees at the moment. So there's always a window of vulnerability before browsers start supporting that mechanism. To know when a particular security mechanism is asked by the website, we crawl the history snapshot of Alexa top 5,000 websites from the Internet Archive, and we extract their headers to obtain the earliest time when any website first utilized a given security mechanism. In this table, we compare the earliest time when any website requests a security mechanism versus when desktop browsers and most mobile browsers start supporting them. We find the adoption of security mechanisms on mobile browsers is significantly slower than on desktop browsers. It usually takes an actual 2 or 3 years to make half of mobile browsers start supporting, and another 1 year to make 75% of mobile browsers start supporting. Due to the complexity of browsers' code, security regressions may happen to browsers where a later browser version stops supporting the security mechanisms that used to be supported. If that regression is fixed soon in a later version, we call it a temporary regression. Otherwise, it's a permanent regression. According to our study, we find 55% of browser families show signs of regressions. Unfortunately, both temporary and permanent regressions appear in all categories of security mechanisms except the iframe sandboxing. Given the complexity of the content security policy, we implement over 200 tests to cover remaining corner cases of them. We find most regressions are occurring in the adopting of CSP, but fortunately, most of these regressions are fixed on in a later version, so they're temporary. As for the security regressions in top 5 browsers, we find UC browser shows frequent regressions in the same origin policy, content security policy, and others. We also find the Opera browser stopped supporting the HSTS from version 15 to version 26 with 1-year vulnerability window. Thereby, they're exposing their users to the man-in-the-middle attacks. One could think the browser security is really relying on the browser itself, but actually, many mobile browsers are building using the web view. So this kind of like counterintuitive. Actually, the version of WebView is the version of WebView can depend on the underlying system. So in principle, more recent versions of WebView should support more security mechanisms. Because of this, we find 2 users who utilize the latest version of the same browser can experience vastly different levels of security. In order to evaluate the relationship between the security and underlying OS, so we evaluate the most recent version of all different browser families on Android, Lollipop, Marshmallow, and Nougat, respectively. So in this figure, we basically shows the vulnerabilities of each browser on the x-axis, ordered by the rank, and by testing them on different systems as each row denotes. So what can we learn from this figure? First, there is a clear security improvement as WebView-based browsers that are highlighted. Some of them are highlighted in the highlighted here. So if they're running on newer system versions, their security level is also promoted. Second, most selected browsers share a common vulnerability that the allow from value of xframe options header is not respected, thereby causing the website that actually use it are potentially vulnerable to the clickjacking attack. Third, we also find the UC Mini browser is an outlier among all these browsers because it shows the exact same and biggest number of vulnerabilities regardless of the Android versions. The reason of this result is, as opposed to the traditional browsers, UC Mini is a proxy-based browser which uses dedicated remote servers to render web pages and support security mechanisms. So we find UC Mini shows the worst case of supporting security mechanisms. So if you are interested in more details here, please refer to our paper. Let's talk about 2 case studies with regard to the impact of browser vulnerabilities on web apps. The Xframe options header is an established security header for preventing the clickjacking attack. However, Chrome and WebView-based browsers discard the entire header when the allow from value is used. So to understand the potential risks resulting from this decision, we analyzed the Xframe options header of Alexa top websites, and we found 231 websites out of the at least 10,000 websites that use the Xframe options header are actually using the allow from. Among them, there's still 175 websites, including the American, Russian banks, the government sites of US, China, Brazil, and India, and the cloud instrumentation services. They don't even utilize the alternative anti-clickjacking mechanism, the CSP's frame and sensitive directive. So most of these websites have user account that could be abused through the clickjacking attack, so that their personal and financial information could be leaked. The second case study is for the CSRF attack. The CSRF attack happens when a malicious website forges the request to perform unwanted actions on the vulnerable web app on behalf of an authenticated user. So the SameSite attribute is introduced to mitigate the CSRF attack. We find 93 websites out of the Alexa top websites are utilizing the SameSite attribute, including an Italian bank and the biggest streaming platform. Therefore, users of these web apps cannot get expected CSRF mitigation if they are using browsers that are not supporting it. Okay, probably I don't have time to conclusion, but all right, I'm very thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions. Mm-hmm. Oops, can you go back?
Hi, Ben Stock from CISPA. Thanks for the talk. I'm here. I'm wondering for CSP level 3, that's kind of a living standard, and if Google decides that tomorrow they want to add a directive, there's a directive. Can you explain how you determine if there's full support for level 3? Because there is no level 3. There's only level 3 today.
This actually level 3, but it's like in the draft. So there's some directives that proposed for the level 3. Maybe we can think like offline for that, yeah.
Hey, Manuel Egele, Boston University. Very interesting talk. So I was wondering whether you found inconsistencies or how big your overlap was with the information presented on sites like caniuse.com, which shows, I believe, or investigates similar information than what you're looking for.
Yeah, I actually know that website. They provide many information for the desktop browsers and some of the mobile browsers, but because in the market there are over hundreds of different mobile browsers, those like many mobile browsers are now covered in that website, and there are also like many security mechanisms that are now also not tested by that website. So yeah, and I think that website basically. I didn't say they consider how the browser is working on different Android systems, and that's a very counterintuitive finding in our paper. Yeah. I believe the downloads can actually indicate like how popular these browsers are, and because these browsers are also providing some very some features that like Chrome or others not provided by default, such as the like increased performance, and also like I know one of the like some of the proxy-based browsers, they are trying to compress the data, increase the performance. So these are not some features that can provided by the normal browsers.